By 1917, World War I had dragged on into its fourth year, and Austria-Hungary had not been doing its best against, well, anyone except for the Italians because of Italian Chief of Staff Luigi Cadorna, who was probably the dumbest military leader of all time. Anyway, the Empire attempted to negotiate a separate peace with the Entente in what became known as the Sixtus Affair. However, Austria-Hungary would remain in the war until the end. But what if in an alternate timeline, Austria-Hungary successfully negotiated a separate peace with the Entente in the war? But first, some context about the Sixtus Affair and why it didn't work out. So Emperor Charles I had decided to secretly enter into peace negotiations with France. He used his brother-in-law, Prince Sixtus of Bourbon-Parma, who was an officer in the Belgian army, as an intermediary, as well as enlisting the help of his loyal childhood friend and aide-de-camp, Thomas Erdodi. Charles initially contacted the prince via contacts in neutral Switzerland and Empress Zita, who wrote a letter inviting him to Vienna. Zita's mother, Maria Antonia, delivered the letter personally. Another intermediary was Joseph Rettenger, a London-based Polish literary scholar and budding politician who was a friend of Sixtus, Xavier, and Zita of Bourbon-Parma, and he would receive backing from the British to support the initiative. The French terms to Austria-Hungary were the restoration to France of Alsace-Lorraine, which had been annexed by Germany after the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, the restoration of the independence of Belgium, which had been occupied by Germany since 1914, and France also demanded the independence of Serbia, and lastly to hand over Constantinople to Russia. Funnily enough, Charles I agreed, in principle at least, to the first 3 points, but held out on handing Constantinople to Russia as he didn't have any influence in trying to get the Ottoman Empire to give up Constantinople. But somehow he believed that he could have influence in Germany in getting Belgium and Alsace-Lorraine back. But anyway, he wrote a letter on March 24th, 1917 to Sixtus, saying that he would use all of his personal influence that he could to the President of France to get this done. However, this wouldn't work out in any way, as Germany refused to negotiate over the release of Alsace-Lorraine, and also Russia saw a collapse on the horizon. In April of 1918, after the German-Russian Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the Austro-Hungarian Foreign Minister Count Ottokar von Czernin made a speech attacking the incoming French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau as being the main obstacle to peace favoring the Central Powers. Clemenceau then had Emperor Charles's letter to Prince Sixtus published. For a while there were fears that Germany might occupy Austria during this time. To mediate this threat, Czernin persuaded Charles to send a word of honor to Austria-Hungary's allies saying that Sixtus had not been authorized to show the letter to the French government, that Belgium had never been mentioned, and that Clemenceau had lied about mentioning Alsace-Lorraine. Czernin had actually been in contact with the German embassy throughout the entire crisis, and when attempting to persuade the emperor to step down because of the affair. However, after this failed, Czernin himself resigned. The entire affair was an embarrassment to Charles and forced Austria-Hungary into an even more dependent position on Germany, who was its ally and whom the empire had essentially tried to leave hanging, so things between the Central Powers got a little awkward, to say the least. Conditions that would have to be changed would first be to expand the proposed peace treaty to include all other countries that Austria-Hungary was at war with, such as Serbia, Italy, and Romania, to also sign the peace agreement. Also, the idea that Austria-Hungary could just leave a world war, which they kind of started, really wouldn't sit well with many countries. It would also be very hard for Austria-Hungary to drop out of the war, as there would be a lot of other conditions to change. And honestly, I don't think this really could have realistically happened. German reactions to Austria-Hungary dropping out will be immediate anger, since, of course, Austria-Hungary had started the war and Germany had to carry them throughout the war on the Eastern Front, as most of the Austro-Hungarian leadership was incompetent. Germany feels strongly betrayed by the empire, and although Austria-Hungary would say that German troops can't pass through their territory, they would do it anyway to maintain supply lines. And I don't think Germany would be very opposed by the Austro-Hungarians, as their military force was absolutely exhausted and there's nothing that the Entente can do about it either. On the Eastern Front, Germany would have to pull back a lot of gains from Ukraine to refocus their new shortened supply lines and manpower shortages. You see, although the Austro-Hungarians sucked in combat, their troops did very well under German leadership. So Germany now has a lot less men on the Eastern Front and an entire ally is gone. This might impact whether or not the October Revolution occurs in Russia, because now things start to look a lot better for the provisional government. But Russia was extremely chaotic and just a total mess, so Russia's historical records are also closed, and therefore I can't really determine fully what happens on the Russian front. The Balkans is where things start to get really messed up, though, starting with the conditions for Austria-Hungary to be able to drop out. Serbia, Italy, and Romania will demand territory that Austria-Hungary would be unwilling to give up, but in this timeline the Empire will. However, Austria-Hungary is giving up their territory to Serbia, which is occupied by Germany and Bulgaria, which makes things really weird. Also, Austria-Hungary gives up land to Italy, which the Empire had been beating. Then, of course, there's the Romania factor, who was getting beat up by Germany, so you can kind of see the issue here. Germany is going to have to divert more forces to the Balkans from the Eastern Front, and these Germans aren't going to be able to instantly solve every problem, because they would likely have pretty poor morale now, as many troops would question why they are still fighting if Austria-Hungary signed a separate peace with the Entente, and gave Serbia concessions after invading the country in 1914 because a Serb shot their Archduke. So Germany tries to plug areas left and right, but they won't be able to hold everything forever. The future of Austria-Hungary would be very bleak. Bosnia would roar up in secessionist movements, as would Czechoslovakia and Galicia. The Austro-Hungarian army would see troops from these nationalist movements instantly defect. Hungary would probably also secede from Austria by 1918, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire explodes in a large civil war of separatism. But keep in mind that the empire is devastated from the First World War, so the separatist and nationalist movements will be successful. However, the Balkans would see hyper-nationalism as a normal ideology and, of course, Balkanization. As for the rest of World War I and its aftermath in this alternate timeline, the Entente still wins, of course. But it would definitely be a lot sooner, as Germany has to send intervention forces into the Austro-Hungarian Empire to secure their own supply lines to their troops on these fronts. But Germany will be forced to withdraw to defend lines closer to Germany itself, which may face the sparks of revolution after Austria-Hungary drops out. Again, there are a ton of indeterminate factors here, as Austria-Hungary leaving the war in 1917 is such a drastic change. To sum everything up, the Balkans and Southern Europe are very devastating and in a warring period. The Empire's last-ditch effort to remain alive fails. Russia has the potential to keep the provisional government, but that part may be wishful thinking. World War I ends in early 1918 after mass German overextension and withdrawal across Southern and Eastern Europe. The post-war period and overall consequences on Germany are completely unknown. However, they will probably be almost as drastic as they were in our timeline. This is, of course, just one possible scenario, but what do you think would have happened if the Sixtus Affair was successful and Austria-Hungary dropped out of World War I? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.